All right, sir, stand up. Manager says you're trespassing. You're leaving now.
I'm a ticketed passenger. I scanned in. You're about to put hands on the wrong man.
Save the speech. Show ID or I'm cuffing you for disorderly.
Do it, and make sure that Axon logo's in frame because you're arresting a federal judge over a tracksuit.
Officer Derek Vance was 29 years old, 4 years onto the force, and possessed the kind of dangerous confidence that often masquerades as competence. He had walked into Terminal 3 of Chicago's O'Hare International Airport on a bright Tuesday morning, with the stride of a man who believed he owned every square inch of the floor he walked on. By the time the sun set that evening, Officer Vance would not only be stripped of his badge and gun, but he would also be the primary reason the city of Chicago had to cut a check for $6.5 million. He didn't know it yet, but the man he was about to approach, a man he had already decided was a vagrant and a trespasser, wasn't just a weary traveler. He was Marcus Sterling, a sitting judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, a man whose understanding of the Constitution was deeper than Vance's understanding of his own patrol vehicle. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a career suicide note written in real-time broadcast to the world through the lenses of a dozen smartphones. Before we dive into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell me, where are you tuning in from today? If you appreciate stories that hold power accountable, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are building a community here dedicated to the truth, and we need you with us. The incident began at 10:15 a.m. inside the Sovereign Club, the airport's most exclusive lounge. This is a space reserved for the ultra-frequent flyers, the global business elite, and dignitaries who require privacy and quiet away from the chaos of the general terminal. The air smells of expensive espresso and leather. The lighting is soft. The noise is dampened by thick carpets and acoustic panels. It is a place designed to make you feel important. Officer Vance received a dispatch call regarding a subject refusing to leave and possible trespassing at the club. The call had come from the lounge manager, and the description was vague enough to allow Vance's imagination to fill in the blanks, a male non-compliant disrupting the peace. Vance, who had spent his morning issuing citations to rideshare drivers for minor parking infractions, felt a surge of adrenaline. This was something he could sink his teeth into. In his mind, he pictured a drunk passenger or perhaps someone homeless who had slipped past security. He didn't consider for a moment that the subject might be a man who had spent the last 25 years interpreting the very laws Vance was sworn to uphold. He parked his patrol unit at the curb, flashed his badge to the TSA agents to bypass the standard lines, and marched toward the Sovereign Club with his hand resting near his holster, ready to enforce his will upon a situation he hadn't even assessed yet. What makes this story so infuriating and yet so necessary to tell is the sheer preventability of it all. It didn't happen in a dark alley at 3 a.m., where visibility was poor and adrenaline was high due to a violent threat. It happened in the middle of a well-lit, secure airport lounge, surrounded by witnesses involving a man who was sitting perfectly still, drinking herbal tea and reading a PDF on a tablet. Officer Vance had every opportunity to ask a question to verify a fact, to simply pause and observe. Instead, he chose the path of escalation driven by a bias that told him a black man in a tracksuit didn't belong in first class. And that choice would cost him everything. Judge Marcus Sterling had been on the federal bench for 2.5 decades. At 62 years old, he carried the weight of his office with a quiet, stoic dignity. He was a man who had written majority opinions on Fourth Amendment rights that were cited by law schools across the country. He was known in the legal community as the Scalpel for his ability to cut through legal obfuscation and get straight to the heart of a constitutional matter. He was brilliant. He was exhausted, and on this particular Tuesday, he was simply trying to get to Washington, D.C. for a judicial conference on sentencing reform. Sterling had arrived at the airport early. He had checked his luggage, 2 suits, 3 dress shirts, and his judicial robes, which he needed for a ceremonial photo at the conference, and headed straight for the Sovereign Club. He wasn't dressed in the charcoal wool suits he wore on the bench. He was traveling, and for Marcus Sterling, travel meant comfort. He wore a matching navy blue velour tracksuit, a pair of pristine limited edition sneakers, and a vintage baseball cap from his alma mater Yale Law. To the untrained eye, or perhaps the biased eye, he might have looked like an aging athlete or a retired music producer. To anyone paying attention to the quality of the fabric or the watch on his wrist, he looked exactly like what he was, a wealthy man who valued comfort. He had scanned his digital boarding pass at the entrance, though the machine had beeped an error code initially due to a smudge on his screen. The attendant had waved him through after a second successful scan, but the shift change happened 10 minutes later. Sterling found a secluded corner of the lounge away from the bar and the buffet. He sat in a high-backed leather wing chair, placed his tablet on the small mahogany table, and began reviewing a 30-page brief regarding a complex maritime litigation case. He ordered a peppermint tea from a passing server, adjusted his reading glasses, and tuned out the world. He didn't notice the eyes on him. He didn't notice the hushed whispers near the front desk. Sterling was used to being watched in his courtroom. Every gesture he made was scrutinized by lawyers and jurors. But here he assumed he was anonymous. He assumed that his platinum status with the airline and his valid first-class ticket were enough to grant him the peace he sought. He was wrong. In the eyes of the staff member who had just come on shift, Sterling's presence was an anomaly that needed to be corrected. The judge turned a page on his tablet, unaware that his quiet morning was about to collide violently with a young man's ego. The catalyst for this disaster was a 32-year-old lounge attendant named Brett Halloway. Halloway had been working at the Sovereign Club for 8 months, a job he took after failing to launch a real estate career in the suburbs. He considered himself the guardian of the club's atmosphere. He took excessive pride in the exclusivity of the space, often bragging to his friends about the celebrities and CEOs he served. But Halloway also harbored a deeply ingrained specific view of what a sovereign member looked like. In his mind, they wore suits, or at least business casual. They carried briefcases. They were overwhelmingly white. When Halloway started his shift at 10 a.m., he did a walkthrough of the floor. His eyes swept over the business travelers typing furiously on laptops, the families speaking in hushed tones, and then landed on Marcus Sterling. He saw a black man in a tracksuit wearing a baseball cap sitting in the premium quiet section. Halloway didn't see the platinum watch. He didn't see the tablet displaying federal case law. He saw an interloper. He saw someone who had likely slipped in behind a paying guest or used a counterfeit pass. It agitated him. It felt like a violation of the standards he was paid to uphold. Halloway walked to the computer terminal to check the check-in logs. He saw a scan for a M. Sterling at 9:50 a.m., but because of the earlier glitch with the scanner, the system had flagged the entry with a yellow Verify ID notification that the previous attendant hadn't cleared. A reasonable person would have walked over to the guest and simply asked, "Sir, could I just quick verify your boarding pass?" The machine didn't clear the notification. But Halloway wasn't feeling reasonable. He was feeling territorial. He convinced himself that the yellow flag meant the pass was invalid. "He snuck in," Halloway muttered to a co-worker. "Look at him. He's just camping out." The co-worker, a younger woman who was busy making espressos, glanced over. "He looks fine, Brett. Just leave him alone." But Halloway couldn't let it go. He approached Sterling's table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dropping the customer service veneer immediately. "I need to see your boarding pass." Sterling, deep in thought about maritime jurisdiction, looked over his glasses. "I scanned it at the front," he said calmly, his voice a deep baritone. "There was a glitch." Halloway lied, or perhaps half-lied. "I need to see it again, and I need to see a matching ID." Sterling sighed. He was tired. He had dealt with confident, incorrect men his entire career. "Young man, I am a member of this club. My ticket is in the system. I am working. Please check your computer again." He turned back to his tablet. It was a dismissal, a polite one, but a dismissal nonetheless. Halloway's face went red. He felt disrespected. He felt small. And when men like Brett Holloway feel small, they reach for the phone to call men like Derek Vance. "We have a trespasser refusing to verify his status," Holloway told airport dispatch. "He's becoming aggressive. I want him removed." Officer Derek Vance was not a man known for his de-escalation skills. In his 4 years with the Chicago Police Department's airport detail, he had accrued a personnel file that was thick with citizen interactions that bordered on harassment. There were 6 formal complaints against him. 2 for rudeness, 3 for using profanity with civilians, and 1 for an improper search of a traveler's luggage that was dismissed due to a technicality. His sergeant had noted in his last performance review that Vance struggles with patience and tends to view questions as challenges to his authority. Vance was a product of a policing style that viewed every encounter as a battle for dominance. He operated on the ask-tell-make continuum, but he usually skipped the ask and went straight to make. He had developed a reputation among the airport homeless population as a terror, someone who would confiscate blankets and threaten arrests for loitering in public areas. To Vance, the airport wasn't a service hub. It was his beat, his territory, and anyone who didn't jump when he barked was a problem that needed solving. As he drove his patrol cart toward the terminal, Vance replayed the dispatch information. Trespasser. Aggressive. Refusing to leave. He didn't hear customer dispute. He heard criminal. He parked the cart and walked the long concourse toward the lounge. His mind was already made up. He wasn't going there to investigate. He was going there to evict. He adjusted his belt, checked his body camera, which was on a fact that would later seal his fate, and formulated his opening line. He wouldn't ask what happened. He would demand compliance. The tragedy of Officer Vance was that he believed his uniform gave him the right to be right even when he was wrong. He had never been significantly disciplined. The system had protected him, reshuffled him, and kept him on the payroll. He had no reason to believe this Tuesday would be any different. He walked past the sliding glass doors of the Sovereign Club, nodded at Brett Holloway, who was waiting with a smug look of vindication, and locked eyes on the man in the Navy tracksuit. "That him?" Vance asked. Holloway nodded. "That's him. Refused to show ID, acted like he owns the place." Vance sneered. "He doesn't own anything here." Vance walked across the plush carpet, his heavy boots thudding with intentional weight. He bypassed the terrified looks of other travelers. He marched straight to the wing chair where Judge Sterling was reading. Vance didn't see a federal judge. He saw defiance of his authority. He stood over Sterling, casting a shadow over the tablet. "Let's go," Vance said loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Party's over. Grab your bag." Judge Sterling did not jump. He did not flinch. He finished the paragraph he was reading, tapped the screen to save his place, and slowly looked up at the officer. The judge had stared down cartel bosses, corrupt CEOs, and domestic terrorists from his bench. He was not intimidated by a 29-year-old with a buzz cut and a bad attitude. "Excuse me," Sterling said, his voice level and calm. "I believe you are mistaken, officer. I am a ticketed passenger waiting for a flight." "I don't care what you believe," Vance snapped, hooking his thumbs into his vest. "Manager says you're trespassing. That means you're trespassing. You refuse to show ID. Now you're leaving. You can walk out, or I can drag you out." The lounge went dead silent. A woman 2 tables away lowered her coffee cup. A businessman closed his laptop. Everyone was watching. Sterling removed his reading glasses and folded them deliberately. "Officer, I did not refuse to show ID. The attendant demanded it aggressively after I had already been cleared. I am sitting here peacefully. I am Judge Marcus Sterling of the United States Court of Appeals. I suggest you lower your voice and check your facts before you continue this line of conduct." Vance laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous bark of a laugh. "Judge, yeah, and I'm the police superintendent. Look, pal, I don't care what story you're cooking up. You don't have ID. You're out." Vance wasn't listening. The words federal judge had bounced off his bias like hail off a windshield. He saw the tracksuit. He saw the skin color. He saw the hat. The cognitive dissonance was too strong. His brain rejected the possibility that this man could be who he said he was. "I have identification," Sterling said, reaching slowly toward the inside pocket of his track jacket. "I have my federal credentials right here." "Don't reach," Vance yelled, his hand dropping to his taser. "Hands on the table now." Sterling froze. He knew the drill. He knew how easily these situations turned deadly. He placed his large, steady hands flat on the mahogany table. "I am complying," Sterling said, his voice projecting clearly for the witnesses. "I am reaching for my credentials as a federal official. You are escalating a non-event officer." "Stand up," Vance commanded. "Turn around." "Officer," Sterling said, not moving, "you are making a mistake that will cost this city millions. I am asking you to call your supervisor." "I am the supervisor right now," Vance said, moving around the table. He grabbed Sterling's upper arm. The grip was tight, unnecessary. "Up. Now." Judge Sterling stood. He was taller than Vance, a fact that seemed to irritate the officer even more. Vance spun the 62-year-old jurist around. "Hands behind your back." "I am not resisting," Sterling said, speaking to the room now, to the phones that were surely recording. "I am Judge Marcus Sterling. I am being arrested without cause." Vance slapped the handcuffs on. Click, click. The sound echoed in the silent lounge. He tightened them too tight, as inexperienced officers often do when they want to assert dominance. "You're being arrested for criminal trespass and disorderly conduct," Vance recited, pushing Sterling forward. "Let's go." Holloway, the manager, stood by the door, arms crossed, a look of triumph on his face. He thought he had won. He thought he had cleaned up the lounge. He had no idea he had just destroyed his own life, along with Vance's. As Vance marched Sterling past the front desk, the judge stopped for a fraction of a second, looked at Holloway, and said simply, "You will regret this." Then he was shoved out into the bright lights of the terminal concourse. The walk through Terminal 3 was a parade of humiliation. Officer Vance gripped Judge Sterling's bicep with a white-knuckled hold, parading his capture past hundreds of travelers. People stopped. They pointed. Phones were raised like a salute of digital witnesses. To the onlookers, it looked like a dangerous criminal was being apprehended. Sterling kept his head high, his face a mask of stone, but inside he was seething. He was thinking of the Fourth Amendment. He was thinking of Terry versus Ohio. He was thinking of the absolute lack of probable cause. "You're moving too fast," Sterling said calmly as Vance jostled him to avoid a luggage cart. "I have a bad knee." "Should have thought of that before you acted up," Vance sneered. "We're going to the holding cell. You can tell your story to the walls." "I don't need to tell the walls," Sterling replied. "I will be telling the chief judge of the Seventh Circuit, and then I will be telling your superintendent." Vance ignored him. He felt powerful. He was the law. He had taken control of the chaos. He didn't realize that the chaos was a man who had dedicated his life to order, and that the retribution coming his way would be swift, legal, and absolute. They reached the airport police substation, a nondescript door tucked between a currency exchange and a restroom. Vance swiped his card, shoved the door open, and guided Sterling into the booking area. The substation was quiet. A desk sergeant, Thomas Miller, was sipping coffee and reviewing a schedule. Miller was 55, a veteran of the force, a man who had seen everything and knew the difference between a threat and a misunderstanding. He looked up as Vance dragged Sterling in. He saw the expensive tracksuit. He saw the calm demeanor. He saw the expensive sneakers. And then he looked at the face. Sergeant Miller frowned. The face looked familiar, not from a mugshot, but from the news, from the papers. "What do we have, Vance?" Miller asked, standing up slowly. "Trespassing at the Sovereign Club," Vance announced proudly. Refused to ID, claimed to be a judge or something. Manager wanted him gone. Miller's eyes went from Vance to Sterling. He saw the handcuffs. He saw the way Sterling was standing, not slumped like a drunk, not agitated like a junkie, but erect, waiting. I am Judge Marcus Sterling, the man in cuffs said. His voice filled the small room. United States Court of Appeals. My credentials are in my left jacket pocket. I would like you to retrieve them, Sergeant. The air left the room. Sergeant Miller walked around the desk. He didn't ask Vance. He reached into Sterling's pocket. He pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold badge of the federal judiciary gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The photo ID was unmistakable. Marcus Sterling, United States Judge. Miller looked at the ID. Then he looked at Vance. The look wasn't anger. It was pity. It was the look you give someone who has just walked off a cliff. Vance, Miller whispered. Unlock him. Sarge, he was refusing. Unlock him right now. Miller roared, his voice cracking with the sheer magnitude of the screw-up. Do you have any idea who this is? Vance froze. The confidence drained out of him like water from a smashed vase. He looked at the badge in Miller's hand. He looked at the man he had manhandled. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a lie. This wasn't a fake. Vance fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He couldn't get the key into the slot. Miller shoved him aside, grabbed the keys, and unlocked the cuffs himself. Judge Sterling, Miller said, his face pale. I cannot apologize enough. There is no excuse. Sterling rubbed his wrists. There were red welts where the metal had dug in. He looked at Vance, who was backing away, his face the color of ash. I want my phone, Sterling said. I need to make a call. Miller handed him his personal items immediately. Sterling didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call his wife. He dialed a number from memory. Hello, David, Sterling said into the phone. This is Marcus. I'm at O'Hare. I need you to get the U.S. Marshals down here. And you might want to call the police superintendent. I've just been arrested for sitting in the Sovereign Club. He paused, looking directly at Officer Vance. Yes, I'm serious. No, I'm not hurt, but I am very, very angry. The aftermath was not a trickle. It was a flood. By the time the U.S. Marshals arrived, 4 of them in tactical gear looking ready to dismantle the airport brick by brick, the video of the arrest had already hit Twitter. A passenger had captioned it, Cop drags old man out of lounge for nothing. Shameful. It had 10,000 views in 20 minutes. When the identity of the old man was revealed to be one of the highest-ranking federal judges in the country, the internet broke. Officer Vance was placed on administrative leave before he even finished his shift. He was escorted out of the building not as a hero, but as a liability. Brett Halloway, the manager, was fired before the sun went down. The airline issued a statement apologizing for the unacceptable bias displayed by their contractor. But apologies were not going to fix this. Judge Sterling filed a civil rights lawsuit that was a masterclass in legal argumentation. He didn't just sue for false arrest. He sued for the systemic failure of the department to train officers to recognize their own biases. He sued for the violation of his Fourth Amendment rights. He sued for the emotional distress and the public humiliation. The lawsuit named Officer Vance Brett Halloway, the airline, and the city of Chicago. The city attorneys took one look at the Bodycam footage where Vance laughed at the judge's claim of identity, where he refused to look at the credentials, where he used excessive force on a compliant 62-year-old and told the mayor to settle. There was no defense. You cannot defend the indefensible. The settlement was agreed upon 8 months later, $6.5 million. It was one of the largest individual payouts for a wrongful arrest in the city's history. But the money wasn't the point for Sterling. He donated the entire amount to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants. people who get arrested by officers like Vance but don't have the title of federal judge to save them. Officer Derek Vance was terminated. The review board found he had violated 6 different department policies, including failure to investigate conduct unbecoming and use of excessive force. He lost his pension. He lost his career. At 29, he was blacklisted from law enforcement. He had thought he was the law. He found out he was just a man with a badge, and without the badge, he was nothing but a cautionary tale. Brett Holloway was named in the suit as well, but his consequences were social and professional. He was unhireable in the hospitality industry. His name was forever linked to the Sovereign Club incident. He had wanted to protect the atmosphere of the club. Instead, he had tainted it forever. In the end, this story isn't just about a bad cop or a biased manager. It's about the fragility of dignity in the face of unchecked authority. Judge Marcus Sterling had every credential, every right, and every accolade a citizen could have, and it still wasn't enough to stop a biased system from putting him in chains. It took his title to get him out, but what about the men and women who don't have titles? What about the people who are just suspects in the eyes of the Derek Vances of the world? That is the question we are left with. We paid $6. $5 million for Officer Vance's mistake. But the real cost is the trust that is eroded every time something like this happens. It's the knowledge that for some, innocent until proven guilty, is a luxury, not a right. What do you think needs to happen to prevent this? Should officers be required to carry personal liability insurance? Should the training for bias recognition be more rigorous? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. These conversations are difficult, but they are the only way we move forward. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe and keep your cameras rolling. The truth depends on it.